There we go. For the video crowd that not too many people are going to watch, sorry about that. Just started a little late. We're going to talk about warm-ups. I'll save you from the dribble that I started with. Anyway, so it's not just, if you're benching, just to recap there, if you're going to bench and your working sets are 200 pounds, just going and, doing 135 6 times, moderately okay, and then, couple build-ups, and then you're there. That'll work when you're younger. Your tissues are pretty much primed and ready to roll all the time due to many factors. But it's not a smart way to get going, and it certainly won't kind of help you out. And I know there's a lot of people who make the argument of, cheetahs lay around all day and then sprint at unbelievable speeds to catch prey. Well, like you're not a cheetah. You're a human who probably sits in a desk or carries shit for a living or bangs nails or turns a wrench, and that repetitive movement is certainly not very athletic. So maybe if you just slept all the time and then sprinted for short bursts, you could do that too. But you don't. So this is what I think in a warm-up. This is what a lot of people think in a warm-up. And I hope it provides you some direction. One of the first things that people should be doing is looking at what they're going to do on the day and probably incorporating some of those specific movements. We'll just kind of specifically talk about squatting. So squatting is a knee dominant movement. So in your warm-up, you should have and it could be the same damn warm-up every time. And in that, it should be a knee dominant warm-up, meaning your quads should be feeling it during the amount of warming up that you're doing. So let's say you start off, so like instead of doing kettlebell swings for your squat warm-up, which would be fine, but kettlebell swings are kind of a dynamic kind of deadlift. They're almost like a broad jump. Like I'd rather see you do some kind of tempoed or more explosive squats in that warm-up or lunges or something that is very, very quad dominant. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, which I do enjoy doing. One of the things that we need to remember in a warm-up is that you need to get warm. Why do people feel better when they're in Southern California versus when they're in BC in February? It's because your tissues are warm. And when those tissues warm up, increased blood flow happens. Increased when you move the joint through its full range of motion. In a squat, you're moving the knee through the full range of motion, the hip, the ankle. The knee and the hip, those are synovial joints. And those synovial joints, that synovial fluid starts to move around the joint as you move it through that full range of motion. So even if you're maybe doing box squats or you only squat to kind of just to depth and all that stuff, that's fine. But in your warm-up, you should be pushing a full range of motion to warm that joint up. And I say that by perfusing some fluid through that joint will help considerably. So that being said, as you're getting warm, maybe it starts with 60 seconds of rowing into, okay, I know my hips are tight. I'm going to roll, and the rowing's relatively easy, and I'm going to kind of do some 90-90 work, and then I'm going to go back on 60 seconds of rowing, and then I'm going to go into some ankle mobility, and then I'm going to do 60 seconds of rowing, back into 90-90 hip work, 60 seconds, so on and so forth. And you might do, hips and ankles if you know that's a troublesome spot for you. You might do some like mobility exercise there, active mobility. You're not just passively stretching. And then from there, you might look at, okay, well, I'm going to keep these rowing intervals up, these 60-second, moderate, light to moderate intensity intervals on the rowing machine. And then from there, you might go, all right, well, now I need to start kind of getting the core activated. So you might do, 30 seconds of kind of some dead bug squeezes, 30 seconds side plank each side, 60 seconds of rowing, then back into maybe one more core exercise, or you might grab a kettlebell or even get under the barbell and just start doing some kind of slow down and then fast explosive squats. We'll talk about that in a second, why that's important. And then you might feel, as you're doing the motion that you're going to be doing in your warm-up, think about that. You're going to be like, man, I feel great today. You know that you might not need to do too much else, so you can start throwing some load on the bar. If you're like, oh man, this squat feels like I've never performed one in my life, then so on and so forth. You should be kind of thinking about that. Like, what do I need to do? Tune into your body. Be like, man, does my back feel really stiff? Well, maybe you should be doing, with that 60 seconds of rowing, then doing some, maybe some cat-cow or cat-camel or something along those lines, just to get the low back loosened up. Like, oh, my T-spine feels really stiff. Maybe you should do some T-spine rotations along with the 60 seconds of rowing. And what I try and do is hit kind of 10 minutes of rowing in 10 60-second intervals. That could be, now if you don't have a rowing machine or you don't know how to row or you hate rowing or whatever, it doesn't matter. It could be, walking uphill on the treadmill, light jog, line sprints, or like line jogs, like suicides, but just, moderate pace. Could be really basic 60 seconds of a very basic no jump burpee, like just down to the ground, back up, stair climber. I'm not a big fan of the elliptical, walking uphill, anything like this. You can just go 60 seconds, and then you're into kind of starting with the hips, then to the ankles, then to the core, then the movement, and then as the movement progresses and you're maybe into your last 3 sets of rowing, so you're on your 7th set of 60 seconds of rowing, you then go on to the you then maybe have 95 pounds or 135 pounds or whatever, a nice easy load, maybe 50%, 40 to 50% of the load maybe going to be lifted on the day, and you will lift that maybe 8 to 10 times. And what should happen to kind of recruit some fast twitch muscle fibers is nice slow down, nice and controlled. You're keeping the core tight, you're keeping the back straight, blah, blah, blah. Pushing the knees over the toes, making sure the knee lines up over the middle of the foot. As you're coming down, you want to then explode back up and try and recruit as many of those fibers as you can. So kind of 1, 2, 3 down, and 1 back up. And you might do that for those reps, and you're going to really start to feel it. Kind of, you're going to recruit all those small muscle fibers and the fast twitch muscle fibers to get ready for those loads. And then obviously as you increase weight, that the speed will go down, and that's totally okay as long as we're keeping it. Well, I'm not even going to get into the speed we should be keeping up, but 0.8 meters per second is what we want to kind of look at for lifting. It's a kind of too deep down a rabbit hole in another conversation, but that's kind of where we're looking at it. And then all of a sudden we're actually kind of ready to lift. So that's an example for squatting. Now maybe let's use an example for something that we talk about all the time, rucking. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to pull the rowing machine out and get rowing and then obviously, right? You can just grab your bag. You can just grab your bag, grab your pack, and you can walk for a minute, and then the things that you're gonna do. All right, well, I know I get a little bit of low back tightness every time I start my rucks, and then it sometimes works itself out. So maybe get fucking lay on the ground, do some dead bugs, do a couple side planks, do some, pelvic tilts, some cat camels or something like that. Say you're like, oh, my right calf or my right ankle feels a little bit tight, do a little bit of ankle mobility, whatever, just pushing that knee forward and back, keeping the foot planted on the ground, squeezing your boot, squeezing your foot on the floor of your boot. And then, 60 seconds more of walking. And you can change that up too. You can go 60 seconds walking, 60 seconds pack over right shoulder, 60 seconds pack over left shoulder, 60 seconds pack in the front, as you're kind of doing these things. And, maybe you're not going to have to go for 10 sets of 1 minute, right? Like, it's obviously rucking. There's less involved. Unless you're going to be maybe doing some squatting when you're out there, like I often do. And I've talked about before, you're maybe going to chuck your pack on your front, you're going to hold it, and you're going to start doing some squats. Well, you better believe then I'm gonna, maybe walk for 60 seconds, moderate pace, drop the pack, put it on the ground, and then I'm gonna work, some hip mobility. I might do some 90-90s if I don't wanna, if it's, piss and rain or whatever, or you don't wanna get on the ground, you're embarrassed, one, grow up, two, you can do some other stuff, right? You can do a nice long lunge, kind of get the feet split way out. I think you can look it up as the greatest stretch in the world, I believe is what a lot of people call it. Or Samson lunge is the other thing. I know you can look that up. Samson lunge is an excellent way to warm the hips up. So think about that again, right? Hips, ankles, moving the joint through a full range of motion, these sorts of things. So, and then you might do that for, again, like maybe you will do it for, you might get into it, right? And what'll end up happening is you'll start feeling these warm-ups start to kind of like count as a little bit of movement prep and fitness, and your body gets a little bit more ready every time. If you have a very active job and it's in the summer, say a job like mine, where I'm moving, I'm demoing squats, I'm doing side plank, I'm doing all this stuff all the time, and it's 30 degrees in the summer. Shit, when I go to like get moving, I mean, I'm pretty much there. I just need a little bit of neuromuscular kind of like oomph and get those fast twitch muscle fibers firing, unless I've got some sort of ache and pain I want to take care of, and I can just kind of get right into it. And that's what I really do enjoy. And I'm notorious for probably not taking as good a care as I do to some certain areas that I always think it should buff out, but let me tell you, a couple times it hasn't, and it bites me in the ass. Do as I say, not as I do, so to speak. So, just to kind of recap a bit of that, you got to get warm, and you got to be doing some sort of the movement that you're going to be doing in your workout. I don't want to see somebody doing a few arm swings and some toe touches and then, deadlifting. Like, that's not okay. Of course, if you were ever in track and field or soccer or something like that, but track for sure, I do my track warm up somewhat semi-often, where I'll do some jogging back and forth for 60 seconds, maybe 30 meters of high knees, 30 meters of butt kicks, 30 meters of a B, which is just kind of an up and out. Looks pretty funny when adults do those and you haven't done them before. 30 meters of running high knees, and then and then some leg swings, that sort of stuff. And that might be my dynamic warm up, and then I'll do some more movement prep type work. Those kind of lighter goblet squats if I'm going to squat. If I'm going to be doing pushing, I'm going to work my back, make sure the pecs are nice and warm too, so some easy push-ups, maybe some incline push-ups, again with a hard explode, 3 down, explode up, that sort of thing. Feel like I jumped around a little bit there in the last, minute or so, but I hope you understand the idea that you want to get warm, you want to be sweaty, you want your heart rate to be elevated, you want blood to be circulating, and then you also want to incorporate something in the way of the movement that you're going to be doing on the day. And if you have specific questions, please just always, as usual, shoot me a message. The questions have been great, and I really do try and answer them as much as I can. And yeah, like I said, like it's easier than it needs to be when you figure out the method to the madness, and it doesn't have to change all the time. I'm kind of bad for that. Like, if I have a warm-up that works really well and I do it for 6 weeks for specific lifts or specific workouts, I'm like, maybe I should just shake this up. It's like, why? Like, it's working well, my lifts feel great. So anyways, I hope that kind of clarifies some of that stuff. Then I'm gonna just switch hats from the trainer, strength and conditioning side to my side of clinician. So we'll use squatting again, and which can transfer over to rucking as well. Say you came to see me because you have some inside of the knee pain, or you have a hip that rolls in and it collapses or whatever I kind of figure out. And I recognize that it's coming from, like a weak foot, like a foot that when you put it on the ground, it pronates in and doesn't just pronate. Like, you can have a strong foot that kind of flattens out and a flat foot, but the ankle, the knee, and the hip and the low back are all like in a good biomechanical section. So if that's what I'm seeing, then I don't care if your ankle pronates and you don't need orthotics and all that shit. Like your feet are strong, biomechanics are good, I like it. If you have pain in the inside of your knee, and every time you put that foot on the ground, I just ask you to stand on one foot, I just see that ankle just wobble in, or it holds itself for a second and then the inside of the ankle bone falls in, I'm probably going to do a couple little tests, probably work the outside of the leg, and then give you something to strengthen, probably tib post, like a bent knee calf raise, squeezing something between your heels or something along those lines. And then we might retest, and if I see that it might feel more wobbly, but it's because your foot's trying to stabilize itself. So say we take that into squatting, and you've tried the one of the dumber cues that I was very popular for a while and people still use is knees out, versus trying to rip the floor apart to try and engage the whole leg, because you don't want to lose that foot tripod, but or you start squatting and I see that ankle collapse, so we start to work on these primer exercises. And so say same thing happens, Matt, it feels pretty good, and I'm 4 or 5K into my hike or my run or whatever, and the inside of my knee just really starts to growl at me. And what I'm going to say is you need to incorporate, if you've got an injury, you can't just do a general warm-up that's going to work for anyone. You might have to incorporate some of your own shit. If you are recovering from an ankle sprain, if you are recovering from ACL surgery, if the list goes on. If you're recovering from, like a bulged disc and some sciatica, like you better believe that you're just going to have to spend a little bit extra time doing the things because you have an injury. These are the things I hear all the time. People are like, I just went right back into my old warm up, or I don't want to lift because I don't know, or I don't want to hike because I just don't know the correct things to do for my injury. You should be seeing somebody who should be giving you things to help you succeed at your goal. So, we'll use the case of the foot. So I might get you to, again, so say you get to the trailhead and you're ready to start rucking. Before you even put that pack on, before you put your boots on, I need you to do the exercises that I've given you or whoever has given you. If those are, some single leg squats a little bit, and your butt's, you're single leg squatting back and you're touching the tire or something like that, or the tailgate. That'd be pretty high if it was a tailgate, but you know what I mean. Figure something out. You're doing some single leg squats. You're doing maybe some bent knee calf raises. You're doing kind of some foot tripod. Quick sidebar: if anybody ever gives you towel scrunches, it's just not a good exercise, to be honest. There's better stuff out there. That was like a blanket thing. It's like there's better stuff. We know these things now. So you might have to incorporate those things within that warm-ups or before you start moving, because you need that primer to move a little better. And then as you start moving, you're using those reps. Don't wait until 4 or 5K in to do your ankle exercise or your foot exercise for the first time in that sequence, because if it works, that's great. But why would you don't want to have to stop if you don't have to, if you can just spend a few minutes doing it before. I would rather somebody work out pain-free and work out for less time because they only have X amount of time to work out than just kind of like go on their merry way and then get discouraged, because that's the other thing that starts to suck, is then when you start to around that 5K mark, it hurts every time, or around when I get to 75% load, my back starts to feel a little bit sketchy and I start to question if I should be doing this. As soon as you kind of like mentally like I don't know about a lift or about a hike or whatever, like how do you think you're going to perform when you got to be out there for 10 14 days? It's just not going to be good. You want to have confidence in what your body can do, and it's nice to test that a little bit. So again, probably the 58th recap in the podcast here this morning. We need to get the body warm. That's what we need to do in some way, shape, or form. Do not just sit on the elliptical for 15 minutes. Get off, go to and do a couple of, like your dad's arm swings, couple of knees to the chest, and then expect to perform at a high level. I'm not saying that that nobody can do that. I'm just saying it's really not bright. Unless you're like 15, and then you're probably fine because you're 15, so whatever. But that's what we're starting with, is getting warm, figuring out what apparatus you're going to use on the day, and then whatever it's going to be. If it's shoulder stuff, if you're going to be doing a bunch of overhead pressing and then horizontal pushing, then if your job has been in front of you, then you better believe that you want to kind of work some ranges of motion. You might want to do some overhead carries, right? You might do 60 seconds on the spin bike, and then 60-second kind of overhead walk with a light kettlebell or dumbbell, or 30 seconds per hand or something along those lines. Don't completely gas yourself out. Shoulders are small muscles. They can get tired, but they do recover quickly. You might do that. Then you might be doing, some side lying work. You might be doing some kettlebell arm bars, might be doing some kettlebell windmills. If you don't know that stuff, you're going to maybe just be doing some just small shoulder circles forwards for 20 seconds and then backwards. You want to get your shoulder warmed up. And then obviously, like I always say, life is always in front of us, and how I'm sitting right now, like the pec and the fronts of the shoulders and all that stuff. So you're going to want to kind of pull back. And what I would suggest is kind of like a face down arm circle. You can look at prone cars. This is capital C-A-R small s. C-A-R called capitals small s. Yeah, that's right. And do 10 of those. They're pretty tough, actually. Big squeeze through the scaps. And then obviously you're back on to your 60 seconds of spin bike or whatever the hell you're going to do. Before your movement, right? You want the upper body to be loose. Same thing, deadlifting, squatting, all of these things. Or like I said, or rucking, right? Like you can use all these principles for all these things until you're gonna get this. It's gonna maybe feel a little janky at first, and it's gonna feel a little bit kind of out of form. But once you get the pattern down, it's gonna be good. So warm up, specific movements, kind of prehab you're getting from a clinician, your physio, your RMT, your MD. That would be pretty cool in a perfect world. Maybe not, who knows. Your chiro, whatever. Chances are just seeing it on the Instagram and trying to apply it. If that works for you, that's great. But I always say try and find a professional. And then, take that time to warm up and feel good and have confidence in what you're doing, because I guarantee it will show up throughout your workout. Warm-ups. That's what we got. Another episode, quick and dirty, with Wardo. Cheers, guys. Happy New Year.